Hello, YouTube. This is the age-old debate for all five of you that actually watch my videos. No, I was kidding. But tube versus solid state, it never ends. People, no offense, people come off kind of arrogant and snobbish. First off, just because somebody doesn't have a two rig, don't judge them. Don't criticize them. Don't do that. Go away from my channel if you're going to be like that. Okay? To me, it's all about personal preference. I like both equally, but really, it's not so much about if it's tube. It's more about what amp is it in general. I mean, okay, there. I do have a slight more preference towards tube amps, but not always. I still like a lot of solid state amps. Most of the solid state amps I like are more of a certain brand of solid state. Like I love the Marshall solid states, like the Valve states. Those are really good. Um, the problems that people report about solid state amps, sounding harsh when they're loud and stuff. I've not really experienced that a whole heck of a lot because I've had really high powered solid state amps that handled fine in live mixes and in band practices, and there was none of this loss of definition. Most of the time, that has not happened to me. The Valve State sounds great loud. The VS100, it does not sound bad loud. It sounds really good, and I've played it lots of times loud, and played it on stage. I've played it in band practices. Even the MG100, the few times I've had to use that one live, it never had any problems getting up to volume. It didn't drown in the mix. It didn't have any harshness. Um, and it's reasonably warm and crunchy sounding. So was the VS100. And the tube amps I've used over the years, likewise, have sounded great at practice volumes and stage volumes. They've sounded awesome. I've never had any problems. Um, like, I've seen lots of comments on forums, and people were talking about, oh, how the solid state amp just starts sounding really bad loud. Well, the cheap ones probably. I do understand there's a science behind the tube and the solid state. Tubes typically are more pleasant to the ear. I will agree with that sentiment, you know. And tube amps loud typically will sound smoother and more pleasant, and a lot of solid state amps when they're loud they really will get kind of harsher. But that is not always the case. It depends on how powerful the power circuit is. How much headroom the amp has, what the preamp circuit sounds like. It really depends on the amplifier. It's isolated instances. And I get tired of these people saying, well, I'll never go back to solid state again. You don't have to go back to solid state, but don't try to make people who use solid state feel bad. Some people can't afford tubes. Don't get me wrong, I do want an actual Marshall tube amp, and there's a few I've been kind of contemplating on getting in the next few months down the line. Basically the JCM 2000 or the DSL 100. But that doesn't mean I don't like the Valve State by any stretch. It's a great amp, sounds good. Personally, I also want to get another Valve State, one of the AVTs, to add to the collection because I want a main head and a few backup heads. I know I'm crazy. I like collecting gear, but it's a sickness, unfortunately. But I have used solid state amps live. Sound fine. They cut through the mix. What I'm playing can be heard. No harshness. No lack of note clarity. None of this bad stuff that happens when you turn solid state amps up. Only solid state amp I've really kind of experienced this with, and I think it depends on the cab you're running through. At one of the band practices we had an AVT 50. After about 12 o'clock, it did start getting a little too like it was suffocating after about 12 o'clock on the volume, but it was only coming out of one cab. I've seen a guy use that same head live through two cabs, cut through the mix, and sound fine. But the AVT 50 is the only head that I've ever kind of experience that. But up to about 12 o'clock, it sounds fine. It's when you get it past 12 o'clock. But that's one head I've experienced that on. Okay, that's one amplifier. It's not every single amplifier, and it was only a 50-watt one. You know, but I've played the VS100 live before, loud and proud, and it sounds great. I've played the MG100 loud. At one of my band practices, and this is not like the greatest tone combo. I played a Digitech processor through the power section of a crate amplifier, and it was louder than the guy's 5150 Mark III. Okay, it had more mid response. Just maybe it was a setting I dialed in, but it was cutting really well, which is crazy because it's a crate. You know, I was going through the back end of the crate. I wasn't going through the actual preamp, but I was using a Digitech with a Marshall preset going through the power section of a crate amplifier, and it sounded fine. I've what else? I used to have a Line 6 rack setup that I've played at mini band practices. Never got to use it live, unfortunately. I had to sell it because I had an emergency situation, but we won't go into that. I've played a Line 6 rack setup through a Rocktron, which is also solid state. It's a solid state power amp. Yeah, I know it's meant to emulate tubes. But don't use it as an argument because all of the solid state amps are basically trying to emulate tubes. But I've played that, and it sounded really good, and it was loud as hell, and it cut through the mix. Didn't have any of that harshness that people were talking about. But I think the key is you got to use the right solid state amp. You got to use one that's rated for a lot of power. And if you do that, you will get a decent sound. Now, as it is warm as a tube, they're close. They're not exact, but technology's come a long way. You know, the funny thing is a lot of your distortion and overdrive pedals are solid state pedals that people run through tube amps. The tubes still warm up a bit, but you're still using some kind of solid state distortion. So tube versus solid state, I like them both. I will admit I like tube a little better, but not a whole heck of a lot better. I mean, maybe 20% better. But the solid state amps I have played on have done fine, and they sound great. I have no complaints, and I love my little 15-watt Marshall. It sounds really good. It sounds great. The louder it gets, the bigger it sounds. It doesn't sound harsh. It actually sounds better. Gets a little more sustain. It gets a little creamier. The clean channel, you crank it up on the 15-watt Marshall. Sounds kind of like AC/DC tone and a little bit of Van Halen tone. More AC/DC than Van Halen, but close. And it sounds fine. It sounds really good. So with that being said, that's my answer on tube versus solid state. It's not as big of a deal as you make it out to be. If you like your tone, you like your tone. It doesn't matter how you got it. If it sounds good, it sounds good.